both persons equally and reciprocally, not merely contractually. If such expectations are not met, the contract is usually broken. Erotic love is rooted in passion, not reciprocity. And once the passion subsides, if the reciprocity isn't there, one of the two parties will find the arrangement unacceptable. Caritas is even more selfless, more giving, and less judgmental in our regard for those whom we love. Not everyone is capable of accessing it consistently. It is the only form of loving that helps us know the other person as they are, not what we project onto them. Whereas friendships still contain an element of eros, a bridge, as it were, between eros and caritas, caritas is both benevolent and selfless. In relations that engender caritas, I seek more than proximity and affection. I hope to know who this person is in all her depth and complexity. The more I know, the more I like. That's how love works, full acceptance. According to Thomas Aquinas, 13th century theologian, caritas consists in knowing the other as that person is in his or her isness. This entails a letting be and leaving be, the opposite of desiring or transgressing. Without a capacity for caritas, we would be incapable of sympathy, the ability to know and give way to the other's innermost being. To be with someone sympathically means literally to be with this person's experience, feeling states, and suffering without judging them. Without caritas, it would be difficult to be a psychotherapist. This is why we associate caritas with the most giving elements of loving, including a capacity for generosity, devotion, commiseration, forgiveness, trust, and mercy. None of these qualities is erotically charged, per se. Yet, when we fall in love, we fall in love erotically. As we just saw, this is based almost entirely on what we project onto the other person. This occurs via happenstance. We have no way of consciously knowing what we will project, and we can't control it. It could be a smile, a conversational inflection, a look in the eyes, or other idiosyncratic facial or behavioral feature that we happen to associate with someone we adored as a child, be it our mother, father, sister, brother, nursemaid, babysitter, family friend, you name it. What they all share in common is that we loved them in our infancy and a few years beyond. If there's an equation here, it's that the earlier the love, the more powerfully it sits in our unconscious. Yet, over time, these projections are not enough to sustain a relationship, as the person we begin to know in their isness surreptitiously replaces the person we fell in love with. If we enjoy a capacity for caritas when we began the relationship, we're also capable of falling in love with who that person genuinely is, and begin to love that person even more deeply than the one we initially fell in love with. In this case, the surviving erotic and sympathically charged ways of loving commingle and persist after the heady intensity of the erotic addition subsides, as it inevitably will. But what happens if you harbor an impoverished relationship with caritas because you're still too neurotic, ambivalent, or narcissistic to give yourself to another person? You just may be incapable of falling in love because you're still angry with that parental figure that you continue to hold on to, a figure that no one can replace because you're still in love with him or her and furious with them. You project all that onto the person you ostensibly fall in love with, but the resentment you harbor leaks in and drains your projections of all the goodness they momentarily enjoyed. As those projections fall away, you begin to feel the same disappointments you harbor toward the original love object. You begin to make demands that your lover change this or that about themselves. But it isn't your partner that you're trying to change, but the ghost of your past relationships. Naturally, those demands will prove futile. We are who we are, and we can't change that. This is why you can fall in love with a person you don't even like. In fact, you may even despise this person and want nothing more than to punish and taunt them for all the pain you insist they cause you. Yet, even this isn't likely to deter you if you are in love with this person. My love for the other doesn't depend on its being reciprocated. If it were, there would be no tragedy. Without caritas, love cannot endure, no matter how strong the erotic component. So why is it that some people cannot fall in love, or when they do, sustain it? This, after all, is the most chronic problem that brings people into psychotherapy. We're talking about people who are only partially capable of loving others sympathically. What holds them back? It seems to me that the culprit is their narcissism. These unlucky souls love themselves ambivalently, and this means that they can only love others ambivalently as well. They're able to give, but they're more preoccupied with taking. Freud believed that loving in the non-narcissistic fashion is experienced by some people as a depleting of their essence, and they can't give it up. They tell themselves that when they get enough love from others, then they will reciprocate. But they never get enough to fill the void because there's nothing to fill. We are openness in our essence. We are raw and unadulterated engagement. There is no inside. It takes us a while to learn this. Meanwhile, we assume that the thing missing in our lives is that we haven't been loved enough. We simply need more. We may devote ourselves to being lovable, attractive, charismatic, in order to procure all the love we can get from our friends, lovers, family members, even perfect strangers. We have little to give because we are trying to compensate for all the things we didn't get in our troubled histories. Narcissism is a much abused term and no doubt confusing because it contains both healthy and unhealthy elements. But it's worth wrestling with these complexities because we're all narcissistic in both senses of that term. Adolescence was a profoundly narcissistic time for us, and for the most part, we're stuck in it. What does it take to become less narcissistic and more loving, less needy and more giving? The most intractable feature of narcissism is one's touchiness, the proverbial narcissistic injury. All of us suffer narcissistic injuries as a matter of course. It happens every day in every way. It's unavoidable. But the person we label narcissistic is especially thin-skinned. It doesn't take much to rub them the wrong way. And if they feel slighted, it feels like an injustice that must be corrected. Our current president is a perfect example of this character type, but admittedly an extreme example. Most of us are of two minds about our narcissism. We're capable of love, but not consistently. We can be giving, but we can also be punitive and paranoid and read all kinds of motives into the reasons we feel other people let us down. Paranoia and narcissism are bedfellows, and we know that paranoia is the most resistant feature of our psychopathology to insight and reflection. Jealousy is also a problem. In fact, Freud situated jealousy that we experience at the Oedipal stage as the source of all our psychopathology, especially our narcissism. Can the narcissist find happiness? In a word, no. This is because happiness never comes from what we can get, from the abundance and security we're so convinced is attainable. It isn't. Happiness only comes from what we give, from our capacity to love in the form of caritas, not from being loved, however rewarding that experience may be. Caritas is an inherently selfless way of loving that Buddhists and Christians alike have always known is the only true path to the equanimity that we seek. This has nothing to do with ethics or morality. You can compel yourself to behave